So the Northern Revolt that the Daily Mirror is painting is written by Pippa Creera, who is the political editor of the Daily Mirror. And this paragraph, the starting paragraph starts, Andy Barnum yesterday led a rebellion by local readers against Number 10's bid to impose Tier 3 curbs on Greater Manchester. The Metro Mayor rejected the move after Boris Johnson refused further state aid for the region. So that's it. It's bogus. The rebellion is strictly linked to central government funding being made available. I mean, on the facts, on the evidence, I'm not saying that there should not be central government funding, enough funding to cover the costs incurred by the people affected by the curbs. But that is part of the pattern of local councils throughout the decades. And that is where it is wrong, it is anti-democratic. Because Pippa Creera is part of the problem, because she is a former journalist from the Boris Johnson supporting morning daily or evening paper, the Evening Standard, London Evening, within quotes, no standards, standard. That form is created by the KHOODEELAAR campaign because it has no standards of ethics in journalism. So she is not bothered about democracy, accountability. And that's the problem with the Fleet Street papers. They're not bothered about democracy. This is a kind of paragraph for the moment, the piece for the moment. She is not bothered about going into the context and details of democracy. And we world exclusively demand that the media should be serving democracy and being held to account for its role by the highest standards of democracy. There is no such thing as non-partisan politics or not party political journalism. Because the events that Pippa Creera is apparently reporting on are the events at the core of democracy, or the events at whose core or center democracy makes the difference, for the better or for the worse. So the Northern Revolt is not a revolt. It's a plea. It's not a revolt. It is a false headline, revolt. And it says, the Metro Mayor rejected the move after Boris Johnson refused further state aid for the region. So Andy Barnum was staging the revolution or revolt because Johnson didn't want to accept the demand for more funding. Barnum said, people are fed up of being treated in this way. More regions are to be placed in Tier 2 lockdowns tomorrow, meaning 27 million people will be under strict rules. And it goes on to pages 4 and 5, this Pippa Creera piece. And it's don't push us around. Now, this is not revolutionary talk or revolt or rebellion. This is kind of playground politics. And this will not be actually followed. This whole coverage, this whole talk of revolt will not be followed by any rebellion at all. And I'll say why. Because these very people, like the Andy Barnum and others, did not support a real kind of revolt that was taking place when Margaret Thatcher was in place in Downing Street in 1984-85. The mine workers were crushed by Margaret Thatcher. And when this happened, most of the northern kind of metropolitan areas and local council areas were controlled by the Labour Party. And they didn't do anything to solidarize with the mine workers being crushed by the Thatcher government. And they didn't stage a revolution or revolt. And they won't do this now. And going back to the beginning of the 1990s, when the poll tax was being imposed, the poll tax then became a council tax as a kind of watered down version of the poll tax. The poll tax was being imposed, and it was considered by all the commentators, objective commentators, as being a step too far against democracy and against people's liberties and all the other things. The Labour Party and Labour Party controlled councils did not stage a revolt. It was really a strike and a riot sort of held in the Trafalgar Square by protesters that focused the attention of the Conservative government. And poll tax was seriously altered, watered down, although not seriously sufficiently enough, but it was altered as a result of the riot or riot-like confrontations by protesters against the police in Trafalgar Square in London. And the significant number of the protesters 30 years ago came from Scotland. So although the devolution of Scotland didn't take place for another 10 years or so, the seeds of revolt against the English-centric, kind of authoritarian, repressive government measures were sown at that time or got kind of particular life given to them 30 years ago. And none of the papers today, including the Mirror and the Guardian, which are the ones giving such prominence of space to Andy Barnum, or the Sky News, which has done the same thing kind of yesterday, overnight, is concerned about or for democracy. We shall have to curtail this one at this stage. We'll come back in the next 15 minutes.